Good evening. It's lovely to see your faces. And I thought I'd start by saying a few words about our bowing this evening. Something we do all the time. And I noticed for myself that I wasn't necessarily being very mindful about my bowing. So I just would like to offer that our bowing is a way of connecting our mind and our body. And we can think in our hearts and minds, we can think, I offer the best in me to the best in you. Or we could say, a lotus for you, a Buddha to be. And these are really gifts of recognition that we are in community, that we are together. And I wanted to share a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. He says, to bow or not to bow is not the question. You know, we can do other gestures, we can touch our heart. There's a variety of other things we can do, but to bow or not to bow is not the question. The question is, are we present for each other with our whole hearts and our whole being? So I'd like to look in the gallery view to all of us who are here this evening. And I'd like to offer a bow with my whole heart and say, hello, friends. Welcome. Tonight, I would like to lead us in a guided sitting meditation. And this might run a little bit long. So following that, we'll be doing some walking meditation. And if there's time, we'll come back for a second sit. And the talk this evening that I'd like to offer is on making peace with mud. You might notice that I'm wearing my No Mud, No Lotus shirt. And there's lots of opportunity to make peace with mud. And then I'd like to share or save quite a bit of time for sharing this evening. So I'm seeing some new faces, and I'd like to acknowledge and say hello, and also invite you maybe to introduce yourselves after our time together this evening when we conclude our formal practice period. So. The guided meditation that I'm going to be offering is written by Thich Nhat Hanh, and so I think you're going to enjoy it very much. So let's go ahead and find our posture and have our feet feel connected to the ground beneath us. I want to relax into our body with an upright spine and bring a smile to our lips. And just bring your awareness to the sensation of your in-breath and your out-breath. And I'll begin with 3 sounds of the bell. When you sit, you may like to think of the Buddha sitting with you. You can say, "Dear Buddha, I invite you to sit with me. Please make good use of my back. My back is still good enough. And I know that when you sit, you will make my back upright and relaxed. When you breathe, I know your quality of breathing is very good. Use my lungs to breathe and my back to sit." You can say this because the Buddha isn't someone outside of you. Inside each one of us, there are seeds of mindfulness, peace, and enlightenment. When you sit, you give these seeds a chance to manifest. When you invite the Buddha in you to sit, he will sit beautifully right away. You don't have to do anything. Just enjoy the Buddha sitting and the Buddha's breathing. And you can say these words to yourself as you follow your breath. I invite the Buddha to breathe. I invite the Buddha to sit. I don't have to breathe. I don't have to sit. When you find yourself in a difficult situation, or you are feeling too upset or restless to sit, ask the Buddha to do it for you. Then it becomes easy. Buddha is breathing. Buddha is sitting. I enjoy the breathing. I enjoy the sitting. Buddha is the breathing. Buddha is the sitting. I am the breathing. I am the sitting. There is only the breathing. There is only the sitting. There is no one breathing. There is no one sitting. There is no breather. There is no sitter. The whole cosmos is present in the breath. Joy in the breathing. Peace in the sitting. Joy is in the sitting. Peace is in the breathing. Move into our walking meditation. On the first sound of the bell, we'll rise. On the second sound of the bell, we'll bow to one another. And then on the third sound, we'll begin our walking. So we might want to just take a moment here and make sure our path is open. And with each step, we might want to say, yes, thank you. We'll take one step with our in-breath, one step with our out-breath. We'll move very gently. Yes, thank you. Rise. Please come back to the camera and stand. On the next bell, we'll bow. And then on the final bell, we'll sit again. I would like to share with you a little bit about the mud. There's a lot of mud right now. The calligraphy, no mud, no lotus, is really a reflection of some of Thay's very deep teaching on the reality of interbeing. And I think it's pretty self-explanatory that if you take away the mud, what we often consider smelly and perhaps undesirable, you would not have the flower. So the compost, or the mud, and the flower inter-are. This also can be reflected in the fact that happiness contains suffering, and that suffering contains happiness in it. That those two things that are often thought of as opposites actually inter-are. And I think perhaps all of us have been to very joyous memorial services where we are suffering for the loss of our beloved, but at the same time, we are so filled with joy for the opportunity to have known them and all that they've given our lives. Thich talks about the fact that heaven and hell are one, that you could not have heaven unless you understand what hell is, and that you could not understand hell without knowing what heaven is. And so those two also inter-are. And that's why he often says, this is the kingdom of God, where we are right now. And to put it in Buddhist terms, this is the Pure Land. As messy and as cruel and as unjust and horrible as the world can be, it is also incredibly beautiful. And it is a miracle every moment. So what these pairs do is they help us to let go of our dualistic mind, to understand the true nature of reality, and to understand that we cannot begin to comprehend the one without the other. So we're in a world with a lot of mud right now. And I'm reminded that what we resist in the way of mud is what persists. It's actually an energy that when we try to suppress it, it actually gains energy and comes back stronger. And so as mindfulness practitioners, what we're invited to do is take that, what comes up, and bathe it in the energy of our awareness. And that process is the process of accepting reality. And it takes courage, because we can't heal what we're unwilling to touch. This is something I learned from Joanna Macy. We can't heal what we're unwilling to touch. So anytime we're putting energy in suppressing something, we're actually reinforcing it and strengthening it. So this notion of accepting reality is really a step in self-care, relationship care. It's a step towards healing, to just accept what is. It is not resignation to what will be, but it is accepting what is. So this mud that I'm referring to, this was the first teaching of the Buddha, that there is suffering. And it's the first noble truth. And what's really interesting about that is that it's always true. There is always suffering. And it's universal, universally true. It affects everyone. So that's a pretty profound realization, that there is suffering and that that is part of the nature of reality. And then we also know, because of the interbeing, we know that there is happiness. But if I look now at like some of the things that are happening in the world, well, COVID is here. It's been here for many months. I remember the first time we came on our Zoom call, I was looking at our faces here on the screen, and I just had this thought, I wonder who and how this is going to be touching us. And we're many months into it now. And we know that it has touched us with the discomfort of distancing, this quarantining. It touched us with the illness itself, and it's touched us with death. And then compounding that came this global awakening to injustice that has always been there. But it seems to be so fresh and alive with the COVID virus playing out, and then with the new violence that we're seeing in our streets. And at noon today, I was joining some of you I know in the 8 minutes and 46 seconds to be in silence, kneeling with memory of George Floyd. And I found in those 8 minutes and 46 seconds that my breath made me feel incredibly sad, because I was breathing with such ease. And there was some guilt to that, to the ease I have and have always had to breathe. And there was sorrow. And then that shifted to a sense of gratitude for the possibility to breathe and the miracle that this breath is in this moment. So in those 8 minutes plus, there was a journey of sort of my emotional life with the experience of those 8 minutes. And I'll come back to that in a little bit. There's suffering also always for me around the climate disruption. It is a silent killer that is gaining strength. And as all of our attention is elsewhere, the stories keep coming, and each story waters the seeds in me of grief and fear and anger. And then there is the suffering of relationships. We all have had relationships that can be very painful. And sometimes these relationships we cannot fix. We cannot heal. We cannot avoid. And they persist in our lives. And they're a source of suffering. And then the final one that I'll mention tonight, of the mud that seems to be alive for me these days, is the mud of aging, illness, and losing capacity. That there's a lot of stuff around that. So not to bum everybody out, but Thich talks a lot about the art of happiness and the art of changing the peg. If we've got something that we're stuck on, just removing the peg and inviting something else up into our consciousness that is wholesome and healing and refreshing. And all of those things are incredibly valuable and very wonderful practices that I enjoy. But I guess there's something for me even below the art of happiness, which is the acceptance of the mud, the acceptance of the suffering. That's like comes as the first step. Carl Rogers says, the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. And I would add, when I accept the world just as it is, then I can begin to engage with it with some freshness. Tara Brach has a book out, and it's called Radical Acceptance, Embracing Your Life with the Heart of the Buddha. And in it, she says that we have to accept absolutely everything about ourselves and our lives by embracing it with kindness and compassion, each moment to moment of our experience. So it's not something that we do once and then we've got it. It's something we do again and again and again, this acceptance of what is happening in our lives. We need to be aware of our body and mind without judgment or without pulling away. That thing I see that's happening with my face that I'm like, ugh. It's like, no judgment, no pulling away. That scale I step on, which can be a place of great judgment for me. It's like, no, this is it. This is just accepting where I am. So there's this spirit of acceptance that's an unconditional friendliness, that we welcome reality. We welcome reality that we like. We welcome reality that we don't like, because it is the nature of reality. And Thich Nhat Hanh talks about embracing this sorrow or this mud or this difficulty, this challenge that we're having, like a mother embraces her only child. We embrace it with tenderness, with unconditional love, and with patience. And this practice of unconditional friendship, or approaching this mud in our lives with unconditional love, is a compassion practice for ourselves and for the world. It's a way of knowing and saying you're doing your best, of saying you are a miracle of life, of acknowledging here we are hurtling through space, and we're navigating causes and conditions that often are so much larger than ourselves. And we are perfectly imperfect. Our situation is perfectly imperfect. Our beloved is perfectly imperfect. So this accepting reality is an active practice of watching, listening, loving, tending, healing, and repeating. Watching, listening, loving, tending, and repeating. The first technique for acceptance that I found to be really helpful is the technique of coming home to my body. mindfulness of the body. And I first ran into this back in the early 80s. I want to say it was probably 82, when I was in an EST training in Chicago. And it was one of the marathon weekends of this training. And I had been sitting in a conference room chair with a couple hundred people since 8 o'clock in the morning. And it was now 11 o'clock at night, and we had a few more hours to go. And the whole room was complaining about how uncomfortable they were, that people were stuck in these chairs, bodies were stiff, aches and pains. And the woman who was leading the session says, "I need a volunteer, anybody." And my hand shot up just so that I could move. And she called on me. And she said, "Come up here on the stage and sit." So I did. And she said, "Close your eyes." And I was not a meditator or anything at this time. I was in college, actually. And so I closed my eyes, and she said, "Are you hurting?" And I said, "Yes." She says, "Where is your pain right now?" And I said, "Actually, my pain is really hurting in the low of my back. It feels really stiff." She says, "What does that stiffness feel like?" I said, "It feels like rolls of quarters are just jammed in there and I just can't move." And she's like, "Okay, where's your pain now?" And I said, "Oh, well, it's moved to my left knee." And she goes, "Well, what's going on with your left knee? What does that feel like?" And I said, "Well, actually, this is more like the point of a screwdriver is just kind of jamming right there under my kneecap." And she goes, okay, where's your pain now?" And I said, "Oh, wow, now it's up in my head." And so we went through this. And after, I would say, 4 minutes of this, she goes, "Where's your pain now?" And I was flooded with the refreshment of like waking up in the morning after a good night's sleep. Just, and I opened my eyes and I said, "I don't have any pain." And the whole room was like, "Ah, no, you're just making that up." And they didn't believe me. But I was profoundly amazed that the acceptance of the pain that I was feeling and just tracking it around my body brought me such incredible relief. Whereas when I had been sitting in the chair, I had been trying to suppress it and I was fighting it. So the second technique is related to the first. The first one is coming home to the body and feeling it. And the second one I want to mention is coming home to the emotions and feeling the emotions. And here, what is a little bit atypical in the way we think about this in our culture is that the goal is to feel the emotions and not to feel better. So if suffering is the first noble truth and it's part of the natural state as much as happiness is, and we've got all of these things like COVID and racial justice and climate change and relationships and aging bodies and all these things going on, that we're being invited to feel through our lives, moment to moment, what this experience is. What are the emotions coming up? And I'll tell you, when we're suffering, to take the time to invite up those emotions so that you can name them and experience them, this takes a lot of courage. If it's a possibility that we feel that we're going to get overwhelmed by these emotions, we can take part of our awareness and put it on the sensations of our breathing. So we're grounded in something happening in reality. And then we can just name and experience what's coming up for us. And I'll give you an example. I'll just do this in the moment here. What's coming up for me is relating to the changing climate, how hot it's been across the country. And I'm feeling a deep sadness right here in my chest. And I'm feeling a lot of fear, and that actually kind of lifts up a little bit. And that fear is related to the unknown of what's going to be happening in hurricane season, what's going to be happening around the world, the vulnerability that people are feeling. And now I'm noticing kind of a connection and a love to people who are vulnerable. I'm feeling vulnerable myself, like there's a community. I'm feeling connected to the community of humankind. And then there's that thing that comes up for me again, which is gratitude for not being alone in this. So I'm going to stop there, but it's just an example of naming the emotions and what's coming up, and all of a sudden there's like a spaciousness that starts to happen between the tight knots. I usually start feeling like this, and then all of a sudden the emotions kind of start to do this, and in that spaciousness other things start to arise that I guess I'd explain as like heaven starts to come in. What's beautiful and wholesome starts to just naturally come in to those spaces. And I've noticed that this is pretty reliable when I just am with and present with those emotions. The third technique that I use is relaxing the mind. And this is when I sit in meditation, and I want to intentionally accept reality, to find out what reality is. And I noticed that I've got some thoughts going on in there, and the thoughts are like hot, and right behind the thoughts is a story. And perhaps I'm having a hard time calming down because the story keeps coming back, and I keep adding to it, and it keeps running the tape in my head. And it's like, okay, I need to relax the mind and figure out how to accept reality. So something I can do is I can just say, well, this is interesting. What's this about? Why is this coming up? And then what are the underlying causes and conditions of this story? Is there something I need that I'm not getting? Is there something that actually is going on in this story that I'm missing? And then my favorite is the question, am I sure that I've got the story right? Am I sure that I'm coming to the right conclusions? The story has some beliefs in it. Am I sure that I'm believing and holding on to the things that are true? And this investigation of sort of the causes and conditions that are behind the story is very much the second noble truth, that there are causes and conditions to suffering. And we need to be very sure that we're looking at the right causes and conditions. So spending some time hanging out here and just being with that, it's like, oh, well, that's an interesting belief. Is that true? And also the fact that we're asking those questions, it depersonalizes the experience. So it takes us from being sort of one of the players in the story to being a watcher of the story and how it's working and how it's getting created. And it helps us be a little bit more objective. It helps us let go of some of our misperceptions. And I think this process of letting the story relax, letting these questions kind of begin to tease the story apart, if we sit with it, we can be still and we can know other things about this. We can have insights about what's happening in reality. So all three of these techniques, whether we're paying attention to our body sensations, whether we're naming our feelings and just getting spaciousness in them, or whether we're being mindful of the stories we're telling ourselves. All of these are techniques in sort of waking ourselves up to the impermanence of the moment, sort of unpacking this hot bundle of mud. And when we do that, when we can unpack it, when we can see the impermanent nature of it and see that there's a lot more causes and conditions going on here, then we have different kinds of insights into the true nature of our suffering. That suffering is made of non-suffering elements. That part of what's going on here is a reflection of my love, of their love, of our deepest aspirations for one another, of a sense of justice. So these kinds of insights can help us let go of our attachment to things having to be a certain way, or our craving, or our fears, because we can see that there are things that are happening that are taking their own course and time to happen and change, that this is not a stuck place. This situation, this mud, is impermanent. All of these too are techniques of taking refuge in ourselves. And I want to say a little bit about that when we do close our eyes, when we do sit down, when we do show up to the nature of reality, well, that place that we are, that calm and stable place, is a wholesome place. It is undefiled. You know, things might be going on out there, but nobody can touch this place within us, that our own personal refuge. And in this place, we can sit with the Buddha, and we can be free, and we can be at peace. When we're here, this is also a place where we can begin to see how we might return to the world and engage in ways that are helpful. So I'll close with a story. It's a story of when my daughter was a freshman. I might have shared this story before, but it's been quite a while, I think. And the internet was brand new, and our son was a senior in high school when she was a freshman, and he had a friend. And somehow this friend and our daughter started emailing back and forth, and the conversation was left up on my computer screen. She didn't close it out. When I sat down, I read it, and it was pretty sexually explicit. And I read it very early in the morning, and I was on my way to my very first retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh. And I was livid, and she was asleep, and I had to get going because I had a long drive ahead of me, and I was like, I can't believe this has happened, and he's such an idiot, I'm gonna kill him. And so in order to handle the situation as best as I could in that moment, I unplugged the computer, and I took all the cables, and I stuck them in my suitcase, and I took them with me. Because I knew she couldn't be talking to that guy if I had the cables. So I didn't say anything to her, but when I came back, she knew what had happened because the cables were gone. She couldn't get back on the internet. Well, what happened to me on retreat was pretty transformational. I slowed down. I took refuge in myself. I spent a lot of time paying attention to my body, to my feelings, to my mind. And I realized that I had this profound love for my daughter and this fear of what could happen to her prematurely, right? So when I came home, I walked in the door, and she was just ready for a fight. And I just looked at her and I just stepped forward and I put my arms around her, and I was crying, and then she was confused, and I pulled back and I said, honey, I want so much more for you than that. I just don't want you going down that path right now. And then she starts crying, and there was never a fight. And that changed me completely, to be able to spend time with my body and my feelings and my mind, so that I could come forward to her in that moment and tell her the absolute truth. I want so much more for you. So accepting the mud is, I think, the very first step to giving us the ability to figure out how we're going to relate to the mud and what we really aspire for in our heart of hearts, and that's what we can share with the world. I'm going to stop there. I want to open this up for any sharing that people might have about their experience in dealing with the body, feelings, mind, mindfulness practice with this, the mud. And I'll invite the bell and bow out. And if you'd like to bow in and share from the heart, from your direct experience, you can just unmute yourself, bow in, and say, this is Heather bowing in. And then you'll have the floor for as long as you need to express what's in your heart, and then you'll bow out again. So, thank you. And I will turn off the recording so that this part of our session will not be shared publicly. Thank you.